cold in ancient Rome could be biting, unforgiving, and relentless. Imagine yourself stepping out into the darkness of a winter's night. The city around you dimly lit by flickering lamps and the distant glow of hearth fires. The air is sharp, with the scent of damp stone and earth. You can feel the wind as it cuts through your thin woolen tunic, seeping into your very bones. The chill doesn't just touch the surface, it feels as if it is creeping deep inside of you, numbing your fingers and toes, leaving you with a deep ache that no amount of movement can shake off. You shiver, pulling your cloak tightly around you, but it does little to stave off the cold. It's a struggle, isn't it? The wind howls through the narrow streets, carrying the smell of wet stone, mud, and the faint remnants of burning wood from the nearby homes. The cold seems to seep into every crevice of the city. No home, no matter how grand, can completely protect you from its grasp. In these ancient times, there are no heaters to seek refuge in. No electric lights to illuminate the darkness or soft, warm blankets to wrap yourself in. It's a world of sharp contrasts. The warmth of the daylight seems so far away, and the night stretches long, endless, and bitterly cold. Inside your home, the fire in your hearth is flickering weakly, its warmth barely reaching beyond the flames. You huddle close to it, but it's not enough to chase away the bite of the winter night. The cold creeps into the very walls of your home, and the dampness seeps into your bones as you settle into bed. The thin woolen blankets can't seem to protect you from the chill that surrounds you. Your breath comes in visible clouds, rising like smoke before fading into the still cold air. Perhaps, like many Romans, you've learned to sleep in shorter bursts, tossing and turning as the cold gnaws at your body, trying to steal sleep from you. Can you imagine what it would be like to spend these nights without the warmth of a modern home, without the comfort of central heating or thick soft blankets? It's a reality that the Romans, for all their engineering marvels, could not escape. They had to endure, each night hoping that the warmth of the fire would last just a little longer, or that the cold would ease with the dawn. But in the stillness of the night, even as the city sleeps, you remain awake, fighting the cold. You try to settle deeper under the wool, wondering how the warmth from the fire will last. Every breath you take is a reminder of just how cold it is, how long, it seems, until the sun will rise again and bring with it some semblance of warmth. You may find yourself wishing for the comfort of a modern home, but in this time, in this world, you must endure. The warmth you seek is so fleeting, so elusive, and as the night stretches on, you learn to live with it. The cold is a part of life, but it is also a reminder of your strength, your ability to face each winter night, to survive it, and to carry on the heart of ancient Rome. The elite lived in towering villas, their homes lavishly decorated with imported marble and surrounded by lush gardens. Inside, they could escape the biting cold with warmth provided by hypocaust, an intricate system of underfloor heating that would have turned their homes into refuges of comfort. The wealthy could afford thick, plush blankets, a steady supply of firewood, and even extra servants to ensure their homes remained cozy and secure. Their nights, while marked by the city's deep chill, were filled with comforts that the common Roman could scarcely imagine. But for you, as a member of the lower classes, life is starkly different. There's no grand villa to retreat to after a long day's work, no hearth that glows with warmth or food waiting to be served. Your home, if you can even call it that, sits within a cramped insula, a kind of apartment building made of rough stone and timber. It's a far cry from the luxurious homes of the wealthy, and its walls are thin, letting in the cold and damp that fills the air at night. You share your space with other families, living in tight quarters. The cold doesn't just creep in through the cracks in the walls. It seeps into your very soul, gnawing at your body as you huddle under whatever blankets you have, hoping they'll offer some protection against the winter chill. Your fire, if you have one at all, is small and weak. No grand hearths or intricate heating systems for you. There's barely enough fuel to keep the flames burning throughout the night, and the smoke from the fire stings your eyes and lungs, making each breath feel as though you're inhaling the chill itself. On colder nights, you find yourself wondering how the fire ever manages to keep the cold at bay, especially when the wind outside howls like an animal eager to tear through the frail walls of your insula. What's worse, the winter nights don't only bring the cold, they bring danger too. Without the protection of a wealthier family's private guards, you and your neighbors are vulnerable to thieves or bandits who might take advantage of the darkness. So, even as you try to rest, sleep never comes easily. The fear of the cold and the fear of those lurking in the shadows can make even the quietest moments feel tense, as though at any moment you might be forced out into the unforgiving streets. Yet, despite all this, there's something about the shared experience of hardship that draws people closer. The bonds of community are strong here in the insula. You're not alone in this struggle. Each person you share this space with is facing the same cold, the same challenges. When the wind picks up, it's common to find people huddled together in the narrow hallways, sharing whatever warmth they can muster. The warmth isn't just in the fires or blankets, it's in the quiet solidarity you share with your neighbors. You're all in this together, weathering the cold and finding comfort not in your material wealth, but in the kindness and support you offer one another. Perhaps on some nights you find yourself sitting around the small fire you've managed to keep alive, passing around whatever food you've been able to scrape together. You talk quietly, sharing stories and comforting one another with laughter. These moments are brief, fleeting, but they offer the warmth you can't find anywhere else. They remind you that even though your circumstances are difficult, even though the cold never truly leaves, you have the people around you. Together, you endure. What would it be like to have no warm bed to retreat to, no heated rooms, and no choice but to endure the cold? What would it feel like to make do with what little you have, to find warmth not in your surroundings but in the strength of those around you? You might not have the luxuries of the elite, but in your community you find something much more valuable. The ability to survive, to persevere, and to offer comfort where none can be found. And in the darkest, coldest nights, that is what will see you through. In ancient Rome, winter was not just a season to endure, it was a harsh reminder of the power of nature, a force that no amount of Roman engineering or luxury could tame. While we may picture Rome as a warm, Mediterranean paradise, the winters were far from mild, especially in the northern provinces. The Romans themselves were no strangers to the bitter cold that could grip their empire, even if the winters weren't as severe as those further north. But in the heart of the city, under the shadow of the great hills, the weather could still be cruel and unyielding. In Rome itself, winters were often damp and chilly, with temperatures that could drop below freezing, especially at night. The city, with its hills, its crowded insulae, and its uninsulated buildings, was not well prepared to cope with the cold. The winter days were short, the sun low in the sky, and the cold seeped into everything. Imagine, if you can, walking through the streets of Rome during the dead of winter. The cobblestones, slick with moisture from the frequent rains, are cold and unforgiving beneath your sandals. The wind picks up, biting your skin, sending a shiver through you. The stone walls of buildings offer little comfort, their surfaces radiating the chill that has settled deep into the heart of the city. The temperature drops at night, and the already cramped homes become even harder to bear. There were no central heating systems to rely on. The only warmth came from the hearths, and even those could barely push back the icy grip of the night air. On particularly cold nights, you might hear the eerie creak of timbers contracting in the cold, a sound that would have filled the homes of the poor and the elite alike. Inside, the cold would settle into your bones, making it difficult to find warmth, even when you huddled as close to the fire as you could. But Rome itself, though it endured its fair share of chilly nights, was lucky compared to the northern provinces. In Gaul, Britannia, and the other far-flung territories of the empire, winter was a different beast altogether. There, the cold could be brutal and unforgiving. In the provinces, heavy snowfalls were common, and the weather could turn rapidly, bringing snowstorms and freezing rain that would freeze the rivers solid. The people in these areas were accustomed to winter in a way that Romans in the south could only imagine. The Roman military, for example, had to contend with these conditions regularly. Soldiers stationed in the northern provinces would wear heavy woolen cloaks and would be forced to build fortifications that could withstand the snow and wind. They learned to build fires quickly and efficiently, knowing that their survival could depend on it. Even the Roman engineers, so skilled in creating aqueducts and roads, had to come to terms with the cold in ways that were foreign to them in the warmer regions of the empire. There are even records of snow in the city of Rome itself, a rare and extraordinary event. In 342 BCE, the city experienced one of the first recorded snowfalls in its history, and it was a remarkable occurrence. For the Romans, snow was a thing of legend, a phenomenon they rarely encountered, and one that would send the city into a mixture of awe and trepidation. Can you imagine what it must have been like to look out across the city, to see snowflakes falling from the sky, covering the rooftops and streets in a soft, white blanket? For those who lived in Rome, it would have been a reminder of just how fragile their control over nature truly was. In fact, it was so rare that when it did snow, the city came to a standstill. People who had never seen snow before were baffled by it, unsure of how to proceed. Life in Rome didn't stop completely. Of course, after all, the city had to function, but the snow, though beautiful, was a stark reminder of the challenges the Romans faced when they had to contend with nature in its purest, most unpredictable form. Snow was a rarity in the heart of Rome, but in the more temperate regions of the empire, it was a regular winter visitor. And when the snow came, it wasn't just a nuisance, it was a real problem. The roads became slippery, the rivers froze over, and trade came to a halt. Even the mighty Roman legions, who had conquered so much of the known world, struggled to maintain control over their northern territories during the cold months. The empire's northern borders became a test of endurance for both the soldiers and the civilians living there. When snow fell, life in the provinces slowed to a crawl. Markets were deserted, roads were impassable, and people had to find ways to make do with what little they had. The cold was no longer a mere discomfort, it was a constant companion, one that threatened survival with every flurry of snow, with every drop in temperature. The elite, of course, were more protected from the cold than the common people, but even the wealthy in these regions had to adapt to the brutal weather, relying on their servants to tend to the fires, bringing in more firewood than they'd ever thought necessary, and bundling up in fur-lined cloaks to make it through the Worst of the winter. Did you know that the Romans rarely saw snow in their city? But how did they cope when it did come? How did they manage in the face of weather that could freeze the very rivers they had mastered, that could stop their roads in their tracks and disrupt the careful order of their cities? It's humbling to think about, isn't it? How even the mighty Roman Empire, in all its glory and power, was still at the mercy of the cold, the snow, and the forces of nature that no emperor, no matter how great, could control. ChatGPT said, in the biting cold of winter, the clothing you wear in Rome is far more than just a matter of style, it's a matter of survival. As you step out into the chilled air, your body instinctively shivers. The woolen tunic you wear is thin, its fibers rough against your skin. It provides some warmth, but not nearly enough to ward off the cold that has settled over the city. You pull the hem of your tunic tighter around your legs, but it offers little protection against the wind that howls through the streets. The material is stiff and scratchy, clinging to your skin in an uncomfortable way, and there's no escape from the chill. On top of your tunic, you wear a woolen stola, a long, simple robe that drapes over your shoulders and reaches down to your ankles. It's made of thick wool, but the material is not soft. You can feel its coarseness against your skin, and though it offers some relief, the cold still manages to creep in. The stola, like most of your clothing, is designed more for function than comfort. It's a practical piece, not made to keep you warm through the long, cold nights, but to provide some degree of modesty and basic coverage during the day. On top of that, you wear a cloak, your most trusted garment when winter comes. The cloak, or palla, is large and heavy, usually made of wool or sometimes linen. It's designed to shield you from the wind and rain, but it too can be rough to the touch. It wraps around your body, enveloping you like a protective shell, but it can feel like a weight on your shoulders, especially when you have to wear it all day. The cloak is meant to be wrapped tightly, so tight that it's sometimes difficult to move freely beneath it. There's no escaping the way the heavy fabric pulls at you, no reprieve from the uncomfortable layers you must wear as you move through the city. The cloak drapes over your shoulders, but its warmth is fleeting. The fabric does little to trap the heat beneath it, and with every gust of wind, you can feel the chill creep through, biting at your skin once more. The wool, though functional, is not a luxury. It's a rough, utilitarian material that makes its presence known at all times. There are no soft cashmere shawls to curl up in. Instead, the material scratches and irritates, a constant reminder of the harsh conditions you're living through. Your boots, too, are designed for the elements, but like the rest of your clothing, they are more about endurance than comfort. Made of leather, they are sturdy but not particularly warm. They provide some protection against the cold stone streets. But on bitter nights, when the temperatures drop below freezing, even leather, we can feel insufficient. The soles of your boots have seen better days, worn down from the endless pounding of cobblestones. And though they shield your feet from the worst of the cold, they can't keep them warm for long. You might add a scarf or a hat to your outfit, especially if you're from one of the northern provinces, where the cold is more intense. A woolen scarf might be wrapped around your neck to provide some protection against the biting wind, but it can feel stifling after a while, a reminder of how little warmth you can escape to. And hats, if you have one, are made of felt or wool. It's snugly fit to cover your head. They're practical, of course, but there's little room for comfort in this kind of clothing. The woolen fabric itches against your scalp, and you find yourself longing for a few moments of relief, perhaps wishing you could tear it off, but knowing that without it you would be even colder. Underneath it all, there are your undergarments. Simple and plain, they're made of linen or wool, much like the tunics, and while they provide a small layer of protection, they don't offer much in the way of warmth. You wear these layers for practicality, to make it through the day without suffering from the cold, but it's a far cry from the warmth and softness that we often take for granted today. The clothing you wear in winter isn't meant to keep you comfortable, it's meant to keep you alive. The weight of the wool and the roughness of the fabric are constant companions, reminding you that survival in the cold is an endurance test, not a comfort. You wrap yourself in these layers, knowing that it's the best you can do. You wear the scratchy tunics, the heavy cloaks, the stiff boots, and the uncomfortable scarves because they are what stand between you and the merciless cold. What would it feel like to wear these heavy, scratchy clothes every single day? How would you find warmth in them? The truth is, you don't. You endure. The comfort you seek is fleeting, a luxury you can't afford. The clothing, though far from ideal, is your shield against the cold, the best defense you have. But even as you shiver, even as the wool scratches against your skin, you know that it is these very garments that allow you to survive, to make it through another winter night. And so, day after day, you wear these layers, living with the discomfort, because you must. You pull your cloak tighter around you, bear the scratch of the wool, and step out into the cold once more, knowing that this is what it means to survive the harsh Roman winter. ChatGPT said, Roman homes, particularly for the common folk, were often rudimentary and poorly insulated, leaving their inhabitants vulnerable to the harshness of winter. In the bustling heart of Rome, the majority of people lived in insulae, large apartment-like buildings with multiple stories, where families were packed into tight quarters. These structures were made from stone, timber and brick, but they were rarely sealed properly. The walls were thin, the windows sparse, and the roofs leaky. When the wind howled outside, it didn't just whip through the streets, it found its way into every crack and crevice of your home, a constant reminder of how inadequate your shelter was in the face of nature's fury. You can almost feel the chill creep in as you sit by your modest hearth trying to escape the cold, but it's a losing battle. The walls of your insula are damp, and despite your best efforts to keep the fire burning, the warmth doesn't seem to last. The smoke from the flames rises up, stinging your eyes and making your throat feel raw, but the fire is still your only hope against the frigid night. If you had the luxury of a hearth in your own home, it would have been a simple, open fire, no grand chimneys, no ventilation systems. The heat it offers is minimal, and it only reaches the small space around it, leaving the rest of your home to fend for itself. If you lived in one of the wealthier areas of Rome, you might have had access to a hypocaust system, a feat of Roman engineering that was designed to heat floors through a network of underfloor heating. This system worked by circulating warm air through hollow spaces beneath the floors, and while it was an impressive piece of technology, it was often reserved for the wealthier citizens of Rome, for the majority of the population. However, the hypocaust was a distant luxury, something you might read about in the letters of the elite, but never experience firsthand. The wealthy could bask in the warmth of a heated floor, while you made do with whatever heat your meager fire could offer. The difference between the poor and the wealthy was stark in winter. While the elite could retreat to their large villas and be cocooned in warmth, you remained in a cramped, cold room, fighting the chill with your firewood, struggling to keep it burning long enough to chase away the dampness in the air. The small space you inhabit offers little respite. You huddle with your family, all of you close together, sharing what little warmth there is, trying to conserve heat while the cold seeps in from every direction. At night, when the fire burns low and the room cools, you pull your blanket tighter around you, trying to hold on to any warmth it offers. It is a restless sleep. The cold doesn't let you forget it. Even with blankets, even with the warmth of your loved ones beside you, the winter chill creeps into your bones. The sound of the wind rattling against your walls seems to grow louder at night, filling the silence with a promise of more discomfort. The floors of your insula are hard and cold, the bedding sparse. There are no soft mattresses, no warm electric blankets to help you sleep comfortably. Instead, you lay awake, counting the hours until the sun rises again, and hoping that the morning light will bring even the slightest warmth with it. But in the absence of insulation and modern heating, you make do with what you have. Some families might line their walls with scraps of cloth, trying to block out the cold, but the results are minimal at best. You might stuff rags into the cracks of the windows, but it doesn't stop the cold from getting in. Every night feels like a battle against the elements, a constant fight to keep the chill at bay, even if only for a few hours at a time. The dampness in the air, the coldness that seems to permeate everything, is inescapable. In the wealthier homes, things are a little better. Their homes are built with thicker walls, their fires larger and more consistent. But even then, the cold can creep in during the bitterest of winters. They might have extra servants to stoke the fires, and their food may be cooked in ovens that provide additional warmth, but they still face the same long, dark nights that everyone else does. Even the richest Romans could not completely escape the grip of winter, though they were certainly better equipped to endure it. The open fire is the great equalizer. Whether you are wealthy or poor, it is the one constant in every Roman home. But even the best fires are limited. You can't keep a fire burning all night long, especially if wood is scarce, and as soon as the fire begins to die down, the cold takes its place. You might dream of a warm hearth, of walls that keep the cold out, of a thick bed to sleep in, but for now, you must make do with a warmth that is fleeting, transient, and never enough. As you sit by the fire, feeling the cold creep through the cracks in the walls, there is a quiet acceptance that settles over you. The winter will pass, just as it always does, but for now, it is a force that you cannot escape. Every crack in the wall, every gust of wind, is a reminder that the struggle against the cold is a part of life in Rome. Can you feel the chill creeping through the cracks in the walls? No matter how hard you try to stay warm, it's a constant, uninvited companion. But it's one you learn to endure because, in the end, there's little choice but to face it. Night after night, in the depths of winter, fire is not just a luxury in the Roman home, it is a lifeline. It is the heart of every household, the warm embrace that holds back the chill and brings life to the long, cold nights. Imagine the scene, the crackling sound of flames filling the room, the dancing glow casting shadows on the walls, and the scent of burning wood filling the air. In a world without the comfort of central heating, without modern stoves or heaters, the fire is the center of everything. It keeps the cold at bay, warms your meals, and, most importantly, provides a sense of comfort and security. During the colder months, when the winds howl outside and the temperature dips well below freezing, the fire is where your family gathers. You can feel the warmth of the flame on your face, the heat radiating toward you, a welcome relief after spending the day battling the elements. The fire is not just practical, It becomes a gathering point, a space where conversation flows freely, where stories are shared, and where the simple act of being close to one another brings a sense of peace. The warmth of the fire is comforting, but it's the company, the bond between loved ones, that makes it truly special as you sit together around the fire. The world outside feels distant, almost unreal. The fire's glow illuminates your faces, and for a brief moment, the cold seems like a memory pushed far away by the warmth that surrounds you. It's where families come together in the evening to share a meal, cook simple stews or roast bread, and laugh together. The fire doesn't just warm the body, it nourishes the spirit. You might be eating a humble meal of lentils or a piece of bread, but there is something deeply comforting about sharing it with your family, gathered together by the firelight. Each piece of food feels warmer when you're surrounded by the people you love. This fire is the lifeblood of your home, but it also serves as a reminder of the fragility of your situation. You cannot take the fire for granted. Without it, you would be left to endure the cold, and the night would feel endless. The fire must be tended to constantly. If it goes out, the cold will quickly return, and you'll be left shivering in the dark. In a way, the fire becomes a symbol of survival itself. You learn to read the flames, to judge how much would you need to feed it, to make sure the embers don't die out too quickly. The quiet task of stoking the fire becomes second nature, a necessary rhythm to your days. But beyond the practical, it's the warmth it provides that makes it invaluable. The act of gathering around the fire also creates a sense of togetherness that transcends the physical warmth. That fire draws people in, and it encourages conversation, bonding, and the telling of stories. Roman families would have shared tales from their day, passed down legends, and exchanged thoughts as the fire flickered in the background. It is around this flame that you find comfort, not just in the heat of the fire, but in the shared moments of peace that come with it. The harshness of the winter night outside fades as you listen to the voices of your loved ones, each one made warmer by the collective warmth of the fire. As the fire crackles and the night grows colder, you can hear the wind howling outside, but within these walls you are safe. There is a sense of security in the knowledge that the fire, though fragile, is enough to protect you. It's an ever-present, ever-watchful companion, one that requires your care, but also gives back in equal measure. The warmth is fleeting, yes, but it is there when you need it most. For the common Roman, this small, humble fire is the greatest gift, one that ensures not just warmth, but survival. What would it be like to gather around a fire for warmth? Knowing how essential it is for survival, would you feel safe? It's hard to imagine what it must have been like to rely so heavily on something so simple, but so vital. That fire was everything: your protector, your provider, your source of comfort in the long, cold nights. And as you sit around it, you realize that no matter how difficult the world outside may be, in this moment, as long as the fire burns, you are together, you are warm, and for tonight, that is enough. When we think of ancient civilizations, we often marvel at their ingenuity and innovation. One of the most impressive feats of Roman engineering was the hypocaust system, a form of underfloor heating that revolutionized the way the wealthiest Romans experienced winter. The hypocaust was a system unlike anything we'd expect in the ancient world. It allowed the privileged to bask in warmth during the coldest months, an indulgence that starkly contrasted with the more primitive methods of heating used by the poor. Imagine, you can, stepping into a room that has been heated from below. The floor beneath your feet, normally cold and unyielding, feels warm, comfortingly so. The air around you feels less biting, more manageable, as though the room itself has been enveloped in a soft, invisible warmth. This was the magic of the hypocaust. It wasn't just a way to stave off the cold. It was a symbol of Roman engineering at its finest. The wealthy citizens of Rome, those with the means to afford such luxuries, could enjoy their homes in a way that most others could only dream of. The hypocaust worked by circulating hot air beneath the floors of a room. Beneath the floors, a network of pillars, small stone supports called pile, elevated the floor just enough to allow hot air to pass through. These pillars were built in such a way that they created a hollow space beneath the floors where hot air could flow freely. A fire would be lit in a furnace located outside the room, and the smoke and hot air would rise through the channels, circulating beneath the floor and gradually warming the space above. This system was surprisingly effective for its time. The warmth radiating from the floors would fill the room, making it feel far more comfortable than the cold, drafty homes of the common folk. The Romans would often have their dining rooms, baths, and other key areas equipped with the hypocaust system. The wealthy could retreat to their warm, well-appointed homes, and as the winter chill outside gripped the city, they remained ensconced in their heated rooms, shielded from the harshest of the cold. But for the majority of Romans, such luxuries were out of reach. The common people lived in insulated apartment buildings with thin walls and poorly insulated rooms. In these humble spaces, the best they could manage were small, open fires or basic stoves. The wind often blew through the cracks in the walls, and the cold crept in at every turn. For these people, warmth was fleeting, a gift only momentarily, granted when a fire was blazing, or when they were huddled close together to share what little heat they could find. The contrast between the wealthy and the common Roman in winter could not have been starker. While the elite basked in the warmth of their heated floors, the poor were left to endure the cold, doing everything they could to stay warm. There were no underfloor heating systems in the insulae, no pillars to raise the floors and allow for hot air to circulate beneath. Instead, the poor relied on the same methods they always had: small fires that burned low and were easily extinguished, woolen blankets, and layers of rough clothing. It was a constant struggle to stay warm. The concept of a warm room to retreat to was a distant dream for many. The hypocaust, though remarkable, was reserved for the rich, and it truly highlighted the disparity between social classes in ancient Rome. The elite could enjoy a level of comfort that was unimaginable for most, thanks to the genius of Roman engineering. The warmth that filled their homes wasn't just a matter of convenience. It was a luxury that marked their status, a sign of their power and privilege. But for the common Roman, the idea of stepping into a room where the floor was warm was almost inconceivable. The reality of their homes, cold, drafty, and poorly insulated, was far removed from the radiant, heated rooms of the wealthy. Yet, despite this clear divide, there were still those among the common people who found ways to adapt. Some of the more resourceful citizens would use small stoves or space heaters to provide warmth. Though they were nowhere near as effective as the hypocaust system, these stoves, often placed in the middle of a room, would burn wood or charcoal to provide heat. The warmth would be concentrated near the stove, but as soon as you moved away from it, the cold would return, making the rooms feel just as frigid as before. It was a temporary solution, one that required constant attention and neither of which were always easy to come by. But for those who could afford the hypocaust system, the benefits were undeniable. The warmth was far more even, and it spread throughout the room, reaching every corner and providing comfort that was almost unheard of in the ancient world. The floors would stay warm even after the fire had been extinguished, the residual heat lingering long enough to keep the chill at bay for several hours. This constant soothing warmth would have made a world of difference during the bitter Roman winters during the luxurious homes of the rich. The hypocaust was just one of the many ways that wealth and comfort set them apart from the masses. While the poor huddled together for warmth, the elite could spend their evenings lounging in their warm homes, sipping wine and enjoying their meals without the discomfort of the winter chill. It was a stark reminder of the inequalities that existed in Roman society, where something as simple as warmth was a privilege few could afford. Can you imagine the marvel of stepping into a heated room during a bitterly cold Roman winter? The contrast must have been striking. The comfort of a heated floor, the relief from the cold, would have felt almost otherworldly for the common Roman, who had to endure the harsh winter with nothing but an open fire to stave off the chill. For those who could afford it, the hype was not just a system, it was a statement of wealth, a mark of distinction, and a much-needed reprieve from the unforgiving cold. For the poor, it remained a dream, a luxury beyond their reach. ChatGPT said. As the days grew shorter and the cold deepened, the Romans, much like people in any time before the invention of artificial lighting, found their daily routines drastically altered by the winter's early darkness. The sun, now a fleeting presence in the sky, would dip below the horizon much earlier, leaving the city shrouded in twilight far sooner than it does today. There were no electric lights, no flickering bulbs to extend the day, and so when night fell, it brought with it a deep stillness, a quiet that seemed to permeate everything. Imagine, if you will, how much the absence of light must have shaped the way Romans lived. As the shadows grew longer in the late afternoon, the rhythm of daily life would gradually slow. Most tasks would cease when it became too dark to see, and by nightfall, many families would be settling in for the evening. There would be no staying up late to finish a task or to entertain oneself with a modern television or reading by electric light. Without the endless distractions that our modern world provides, the night felt longer, quieter, more drawn out. When the sun set, it was the signal that the day was done. The Romans did not have the luxury of a well-lit room to linger in. Instead, their homes would be dim, illuminated by the faint flicker of oil lamps or small fires that barely held back the gloom. The early onset of nightfall would bring families closer together, huddling around the fire to share stories or to eat their simple, hearty meals. But the darkness and the cold that accompanied it also encouraged an earlier retreat into rest. The lack of artificial light meant that people followed a much more natural sleep cycle. Without the distractions of a buzzing city street or the bright glow of modern screens, it was easy to align one's waking hours with the rising and setting of the sun. The Romans would rise with the light of day, and as soon as dusk fell, they would prepare for sleep. The evening hours would stretch on, sometimes filled with quiet conversation or the crackling of the fire. But sleep itself was often a far simpler affair than it is for us today. In the absence of electric light in heated homes, your bed would have been a haven from the chill, but the bed itself was often small, the blankets thin, and the comfort fleeting. At the same time, these long dark nights allowed for a deeper connection to rest. There were fewer distractions, fewer reasons to stay awake and active. The Roman sleep cycle was often structured by nature itself, governed by the short, dark days of winter. People would sleep in 2 shifts, a pattern known as biphasic sleep. After the sun went down and the fire began to dim, Families would rest, sleep in shorter stretches, and then wake in the middle of the night to tend to the fire, share a quiet moment, or reflect on the day before falling back to sleep. This pattern of segmented sleep would have felt natural in a world where the dark and the cold pushed people to find rest when they could. Can you imagine what it would be like to follow a cycle like that to sleep, wake up in the middle of the night, and then sleep again before dawn? How much would your sleep change if you didn't have electric lights, and the sun set so early in winter? Can you imagine the quiet that would fill the long hours? For the Romans, the early nights brought a peace that must have been both a comfort and a challenge. There was time for reflection, for storytelling, for the simple pleasure of being still. But there was also a deep silence, a silence that would have been strange and overwhelming, especially in a city that was normally filled with the sounds of bustling life. In the stillness of the night, there were no phones, no radios, no modern distractions. The cold would make itself known, and sleep, though necessary, was not always easy to find. The thin woolen blankets might not do enough to warm you through the long hours. There would be no snuggly electric blanket to keep the chill at bay. The weight of the quiet was almost as heavy as the cold, and sleep came more slowly in the silence. But there was also something beautiful about this simplicity, the absence of noise, the stillness that allowed the mind to wander, the time for connection with loved ones. The evenings would have been a time to reflect on the day, to speak with family members, and perhaps to share stories passed down through generations. The firelight would flicker softly in the background as you settled into sleep, knowing that the morning would soon come with the warmth of the rising sun, offering a brief reprieve before the cycle would begin again. The Roman night was long, and while it may have been filled with quiet and discomfort, it also provided moments of peace that are hard to imagine in our fast-paced, illuminated world. It was a rhythm governed by nature, by the turning of the seasons, and by the very fact of being human. In this simpler, slower time, the long nights were a reminder of both the fragility of life and the warmth that we could still find in each other's company. It was a time for rest, for reflection, and for quiet moments that modern life often robs us of. As the winter nights stretched on, you would eventually drift into the kind of deep, peaceful sleep that comes only when the world around you is still, and when the morning light returned, there would be another day to greet, with its own share of challenges and warmth. But for now, the quiet of the Roman night wraps around you like a comforting blanket, and you can rest, knowing that tomorrow, the cycle will start anew. ChatGPT said. Winter in ancient Rome, with its long, cold nights and bitter winds, could feel isolating, especially for those who lived in the less privileged parts of the city. But the Romans knew that survival through the harshest seasons required more than just personal strength. It required the warmth and solidarity of community. During the winter months, the cold was a constant companion, yet it was often pushed back by the togetherness found in shared spaces, where people gathered not only for warmth but for company, comfort, and conversation. The Forum, the heart of Roman civic and social life, became a gathering place for those braving the chill. It was where the pulse of the city could still be felt, even on the coldest days. While the market stalls and bustling crowds of summer faded with the colder months, the Forum still remained alive with the voices of those who couldn't afford to stay indoors. In the winter, the Forum became a space of shared experiences. The cold could drive people together, offering warmth not just from the physical closeness but from the sense of belonging that came with being part of something larger. You could find solace in the fact that, no matter how bitter the cold, you were not alone in facing it. On particularly harsh winter days, the common people often found themselves gravitating towards the baths, another crucial communal space in Roman society. The baths were much more than places for personal hygiene. They were the social centers of Rome. They offered warmth, a respite from the bitter weather, and an opportunity to connect with others. The steam from the hot water would rise into the cold air, enveloping everyone in a comforting embrace. As you soaked in the heated pools, your muscles loosening from the warmth, the world outside seemed to disappear. The noise of the city, the biting winds, and the discomforts of daily life were replaced by the laughter and chatter of friends and strangers alike. In the crowded, bustling rooms of the baths, the cold of winter was momentarily forgotten. The warmth of the water, the heat from the stoves, and the shared experience of relaxation would bring people together, offering a kind of communal solace. You might share stories with those around you, exchange news, or simply enjoy the company of others. In a society where personal interaction and community was so deeply valued, the baths offered an essential space to reconnect with others, especially when the isolation of winter threatened to keep people apart. But socializing in winter wasn't limited to just the Forum or the baths. In many Roman homes, families would gather around the hearth, sharing not only warmth but the precious gift of togetherness. A fire might crackle in the corner, offering what little warmth the modest home could provide, while family members huddled close together under thin woolen blankets, finding comfort in shared closeness. The long, dark winter nights would stretch on, but it was in these moments of intimacy, the sharing of food, stories, and laughter, that the cold was kept at bay. The simple act of being together offered more warmth than any fire could. For those With the means, winter dinners and feasts were a way to foster community in the warmth of a well-lit dining room. These occasions allowed Romans to gather with friends and acquaintances to share food, wine, and conversation, ensuring that the coldest days of the year weren't filled with loneliness. Even though winter might have meant physical discomfort, it also brought about a sense of unity, of coming together to enjoy each other's company, and to find warmth not just in the fire, but in each other. The cold of winter, despite its challenges, reminded the Romans of the strength found in social bonds. As much as they relied on the physical warmth of their homes, fires, and baths, it was the warmth of their communities that truly helped them survive. The shared experience of living through winter, the collective laughter, the shared stories, and the simple act of gathering together was as vital to survival as the fire itself. Have you ever found comfort in the warmth of a shared space, in the laughter and voices of your loved ones, even on the coldest nights? The Romans knew that in these moments of connection, the cold outside could be temporarily forgotten. Whether gathered around the fire at home, soaking in the steamy baths, or exchanging news in the forum, it was the bonds between people that made even the harshest winters bearable. It was in the strength of community that they found the resilience to endure, and in those shared spaces, the warmth they so desperately needed. The air in winter Rome, thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, brings a deep chill that gnaws at your bones. The city itself seems to shiver beneath the weight of the cold, the streets filled with the steady crunch of boots on frozen ground. But within the warmth of a modest home, the true comforts of winter are found in the kitchen. Food, simple yet satisfying, becomes more than just sustenance. It becomes a source of warmth, a way to shield yourself against the biting cold that surrounds you on a typical winter's day. The kitchen is where the warmth begins. You can hear the crackling of the fire as it burns in the hearth, its flames jumping and dancing in the darkness of the room. As the fire crackles, you begin to prepare a meal that will warm not only your body but your soul. The scent of roasting meat, perhaps a small lamb, or more likely a humble cut of pork, fills the air, rich and savory, its juices bubbling over the fire. The aroma of herbs like rosemary and thyme mingles with the smell of wood smoke, creating an earthy, comforting fragrance. The food may not be luxurious, but it is hearty and nourishing, exactly what you need to face the cold nights ahead. Stews, thick and warming, are a staple of Roman winter meals. A mixture of root vegetables like carrots, onions, and turnips, combined with beans and lentils, simmer slowly over the fire, their earthy, sweet aromas filling the room. Perhaps there is a bit of salted pork or lamb added for flavor, though meat is a luxury reserved for special occasions. The warmth of the pot, sending up steam into the cool air, invites you to settle close, inhaling the comforting smells as they wrap around you like a blanket. The rich broth bubbles gently, and you stir it with a wooden spoon, watching as the steam rises in soft curls. The only warmth in the room besides the fire itself. Bread, too, is a crucial part of the winter meal. It's thick and crusty, perhaps made with a bit of rye or barley, its texture hearty and satisfying. When pulled from the oven, the bread is warm, the crust golden and crisp, the soft center still steaming, the sound of the knife slicing through. The loaf is a comfort in itself, and as you break off a piece, it crumbles slightly, offering the earthy taste of the grain with every bite. The bread pairs perfectly with a wedge of cheese, another staple of the Roman diet. The cheese, perhaps a sharp pecorino or a soft creamy ricotta, adds a richness to the meal, its flavor tangy and bold against the blandness of the bread. The meal itself is often shared in the company of family and friends, a communal experience that carries its own warmth. In the crowded homes of the lower classes, where space is limited and families gather together in close quarters, meals become a time for bonding, for sharing not just food, but stories, laughter, and comfort. Everyone contributes, whether it's the task of stirring the stew, slicing the bread, or pouring the wine. The shared effort of preparing the meal creates a sense of togetherness, the simple act of working together in the kitchen helping to ward off the isolation that the cold can bring. As the food is brought to the table, it's hard not to feel a sense of gratitude. The cold that wraps around the house, seeping in through cracks in the walls, is momentarily forgotten as the warmth of the meal fills your senses. The fire crackles nearby, the steam rising from the stew like a soft sigh. You take a bite of the hearty soup, the rich flavors of beans, herbs, and meat mingling in your mouth. It's simple, but it's exactly what you need. The warmth spreads through you, reaching into your cold fingers and toes, easing the tightness in your muscles, and offering a moment of peace in the midst of winter's chill. In the deeper, colder nights, when the fire has burned low, the meal becomes a quiet ritual, a chance to reflect on the day, to gather together, and to find warmth in each other's company. The soup, the bread, the cheese, all serve not just to nourish the body, but to nurture the spirit. There is something deeply comforting in sharing a meal with others, in passing the bowl around and hearing the clink of spoons and cups as people eat, talk, and laugh together. The cold may be outside, but inside, there is warmth both from the food and from the presence of those you hold dear. The preparation of a winter meal is in itself a gentle reminder of the importance of community. The food may not be elaborate, but it is made with care, with the understanding that each ingredient plays a role in providing warmth and sustenance. The fire, the stew, the bread all are parts of a larger ritual of survival, a ritual that it is passed down from one generation to the next. In a world where survival often depends on the seasons, meals become moments of connection to the land, to family, and to the past. What would it feel like to sit down to a bowl of soup after a long, cold day? To have the warmth of the food fill you, to be surrounded by those you love, all sharing in the same simple, nourishing experience. In the quiet of the Roman winter, these meals were more than just ways to stave off hunger. They were ways to survive, to endure, and to find comfort in the long, dark nights. In the heart of winter, when the wind howls through the streets of Rome and the chill clings to every surface, the bathhouse becomes a sanctuary, a warm refuge from the icy grasp of the outside world. The baths were far more than just places for cleaning. They were vital social spaces, where people came together not only for physical cleanliness but for relaxation, connection, and a reprieve from the harshness of the winter cold. The bathhouse was one of the few places in ancient Rome where people who could step away from the biting cold and find solace in the warmth of the steam-filled rooms. Imagine stepping through the heavy stone doors of a Roman bathhouse after a long day spent braving the cold. The contrast between the freezing air outside and the warmth inside is immediate, like stepping into a completely different world. As you walk in, you are greeted by the faint sound of water flowing, the low hum of quiet conversation, and the heat that seems to wrap itself around you, soothing your cold skin. The air is thick with steam, and the scent of warm stone and fragrant oils fills your senses. The temperature in the bathhouse is far higher than anything you could experience in your home here. The chill of winter is vanquished, replaced by the welcoming warmth of heated rooms. The bathhouse itself is divided into several areas, each designed to provide a different experience. The apodium is where you undress, leaving your warm woolen tunic behind and stepping into the warmth of the bath. You might feel a sense of relief as your body, chilled by the winter air, begins to thaw in the mild heat. The steam rises around you, almost immediately beginning to soften the tension in your muscles. You feel the tightness in your shoulders, stiff from the cold, begin to melt away as you prepare to move into the next space. The tepidarium here, the warmth increases, though it's still a far cry from the blistering heat of the caldarium, the hot room. As you move into the tepidarium, the room's warmth becomes more intense, filling your lungs with heat, making your skin feel alive. You sit on the stone benches, the heat seeping into your body. In the caldarium, the hot bath, the heat becomes almost overwhelming, the steam rising in waves around you. The water, hot enough to make your skin tingle, envelops you in its warmth, offering comfort against the cold that has been gnawing at you all day. The water is rich with minerals, perhaps scented with lavender or rose, and the combination of the heat and the fragrance helps relax not only your body but your mind as well. This time spent in the bathhouse is as much about community as it is about relaxation. As you sit in the caldarium, you are surrounded by others, some chatting softly, others lost in their own thoughts, but all of you united in this shared experience of warmth and relief. In ancient Rome, the bathhouse was a social space, a place to meet friends, exchange news, or even conduct business. It was a melting pot of Roman society, where citizens from all walks of life could mingle freely. You might share a conversation with a merchant from a distant province, a soldier returning from the frontier, or even a wealthy senator. Everyone was welcome in the baths, and the informal nature of the space made it an ideal place to connect with others. The social aspect of the bathhouse is just as important as its physical warmth. In winter, when the days are short and the nights are long, the bathhouse becomes a refuge not only from the cold but from the isolation that can come with it. The shared experience of stepping into the heat, feeling the tension in your body, ease, and immersing yourself in the communal atmosphere of the baths offers a deep sense of connection. It's in these quiet moments, sitting among strangers and friends alike, that you can feel the pulse of Roman society, the bonds that tie people together, not just through conversation, but through the simple act of sharing warmth. The bathhouse also offers practical benefits that go beyond just physical warmth. It is a place to cleanse your body, to wash away the dirt and grime of daily life, and to refresh yourself for the day ahead. In a time when personal hygiene was closely tied to one's health and social standing, the bathhouse played an essential role in maintaining both. The ritual of bathing was not just about cleanliness. It was about purification, renewal, and finding a moment of peace in a busy, bustling city in winter. When the cold seemed endless, the bathhouse would have been one of the few places where the sensation of warmth was constant, reliable, and life-giving. For the wealthy, the bathhouse might have been a regular part of their routine, a daily escape from the constraints of their grand homes. For the poorer citizens, the bathhouse was often a place of respite, where they could escape the harshness of their insulae, the crowded, cold apartment buildings where they lived. For everyone, regardless of their station, the bathhouse was an oasis, a place where the discomforts of winter were held at bay for a few precious hours. After spending time in the hot water, you might move to the frigidarium, the cold bath, to invigorate your body and refresh your senses. The sharp contrast between the hot and cold waters was not just a luxury, it was a form of therapy, invigorating the body and promoting circulation. The sudden change in temperature was meant to revive the body, leaving you feeling renewed and energized after the heavy sluggishness of the cold winter days. Can you imagine stepping into the warm steam, feeling your body finally relax as the cold melts away? The heat envelops you, chasing away the bite of the outside world. For a moment, the harsh Roman winter ceases to exist. What remains is the comfort of the bath, the warmth of the water, and the shared experience of those around you. In these simple, yet profound moments, the bathhouse becomes more than just a place for cleanliness. It becomes a sanctuary from the cold. A place where warmth is found, not only in the water but in the connections made between people. It is a refuge, a space where the challenges of winter are softened, if only for a few precious hours spent in the long, cold winter nights of ancient Rome. The winter solstice held a special significance, a moment of both reflection and hope. As the darkest day of the year arrived, bringing with it the longest stretch of darkness, the Romans looked to the heavens with a sense of quiet anticipation. The solstice wasn't just a mark of winter's peak, it was a turning point, a promise that the days would soon begin to lengthen again, and with that the sun would return, bringing with it warmth and light to chase away the cold and darkness. For the Romans, the sun was more than just a celestial body, it was a symbol of life and renewal. They understood its vital role in their survival, especially in the darker months of winter, when the sun's feeble presence seemed to offer little relief from the chill that gripped the land. But on the winter solstice, there was a deep sense of reverence, a collective acknowledgement that the worst of the cold and dark was over. From this moment onward, the sun would slowly grow stronger, inch by inch, day by day, until it regained its full power and warmth. The Romans celebrated the return of the sun through various festivals, most notably the festival of Saturnalia, which took place in mid-December, just before the solstice. Saturnalia was a time of feasting, revelry, and the reversal of social norms. Slaves and masters would exchange roles, and the usual rules of society were temporarily set aside. It was a time to celebrate the joy of life, the warmth of community, and the hope of renewal. The days may have been short and the nights long, but during Saturnalia, people gathered together in the spirit of unity and festivity, as they awaited the return of the sun. In Roman mythology, the sun was associated with several deities, most notably Sol, the god of the sun. On the winter solstice, the belief in Sol's rebirth was particularly strong. People would light candles and small fires to symbolize the return of light and warmth, and there was a deep sense of relief in knowing that the worst of the darkness had passed. The sun, after all, was not only the giver of warmth but also the symbol of hope itself. It represented a new beginning, the start of a cycle of renewal that would bring life back to the earth and warmth to the people. As you sit in the quiet of winter, feeling the coldness of the night surround you, it's hard not to reflect on what the solstice meant to the Romans. For them it was a turning point, a moment to pause and acknowledge that even in the darkest times, light would eventually return. Imagine standing outside in the early hours of the solstice, looking up at the sky, knowing that the sun was about to begin its return. There's a deep sense of wonder and awe in witnessing the celestial cycles that govern our lives. For the Romans, this moment was a reassurance that after every long winter, spring would follow, and with it the promise of growth, warmth, and abundance. As the solstice approached, the Romans would gather in their homes or in the public spaces, lighting their own small fires, perhaps even offering sacrifices or prayers to the gods, asking for their favor and protection in the coming year. It was a quiet but powerful recognition of the forces of nature and the cyclical rhythms that governed, not just the seasons, but life itself. The solstice was not just about the return of the sun, it was a celebration of the continuity of life. A reminder that the darkest days were always followed by the light. In a time when survival depended so much on the seasons, the return of the sun held immense significance. The Roman calendar was intricately tied to the cycles of the sun, and the solstice marked a key moment in the agricultural year. It was a time to prepare for the coming spring, a moment to reflect on the hardships of the past year and to look forward to the promise of new growth. The sun, in all its power, represented the vitality of nature itself, the promise that life would continue, no matter how cold or dark the winter might seem. What would it be like to mark the longest night of the year, knowing that the days would soon grow longer again? To stand in the quiet of the dark, waiting for the first faint rays of light to appear, knowing that each day that follows will bring more sun, more warmth, more life. For the Romans, the winter solstice was not just a moment in the calendar, it was a symbol of hope, a reminder that after every cold, dark season, light would return, and with it, the promise of renewal. In this simple, powerful belief, the Romans found comfort, understanding that no matter how harsh the winter, the sun would always rise again in the midst of the cold, dark Roman winters. The spirit of celebration was not just a luxury, it was a necessity. The harshness of the season with its biting winds and long silent nights could easily lead to feelings of isolation and despair. But the Romans understood that in order to survive the cold, both physically and emotionally, there needed to be a reprieve, a chance to come together in joy and warmth. And so, the winter festivals became a vital part of life in the ancient world, lifting spirits and reinforcing bonds within the community. One of the most significant and beloved of these festivals was Saturnalia, a festival dedicated to the god Saturn. Held in mid-December, just before the winter solstice, Saturnalia was a time of merriment, feasting, and role reversals, where the normal social order was upended. For a few days, slaves and masters switched roles, with slaves being given the opportunity to feast, drink, and even mock their masters without fear of punishment. The festival's atmosphere was one of freedom, camaraderie, and laughter, offering a temporary escape from the rigid structures of Roman society. It was a time when social hierarchies were forgotten, and everyone, regardless of their social standing, could join in the celebrations. The streets of Rome would be filled with music, laughter, and the clink of cups as people came together to mark the occasion. Public feasts were held, with tables laden with food and wine, and people would gather in the forum or in private homes to share in the abundance. The air was filled with the sound of tambourines and flutes, the sweet, rhythmic melodies of celebration. The atmosphere was carefree, full of life, and filled with the warmth that only a shared celebration can bring. Music, singing, and dancing helped fill the nights, driving away the cold and the darkness with the light of joy and togetherness. Saturnalia was also marked by the exchange of gifts, a custom that added to the warmth of the season. People would give small presents, often symbolic of good fortune, like candles or figurines of the gods. The exchange of gifts was an outward expression of goodwill, reinforcing the bonds between family, friends, and even strangers. It was a reminder that, despite the cold and the isolation of winter, the warmth of human connection could always be found. The giving and receiving of gifts helped remind the Romans of the importance of community and the joy of sharing with others, even in difficult times. In addition to Saturnalia, the Romans celebrated the Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun, which fell on December 25th. This festival marked the return of the sun after the longest night of the year, aligning with the winter solstice. The celebration of the sun's rebirth was an important symbol of hope and renewal. As the sun slowly began to rise earlier each day, it was seen as a sign that life, warmth, and growth would soon return to the earth. The festival was filled with rituals, including feasts and sacrifices to honor the sun god's soul, with prayers for the continued strength of the sun and the promise of better days ahead. In these festivals, the Romans found not just physical warmth but a deep sense of emotional and social renewal. The winter months, though cold and long, were not to be endured in solitude or silence. Instead, the festivals provided a time for people to gather together to share in the collective joy that came with music, food, and dance. It was a time when the community came alive, when the dark days of winter were pushed back by the light of celebration. The warmth of the hearth was supplemented by the warmth of human connection, and the long, dark nights felt shorter when they were filled with the sound of laughter and the sharing of a meal, even for the common Romans, who might not have the luxury of grand feasts. The spirit of Saturnalia could still be felt. In the insulae, the crowded apartment buildings where the poor lived, there would be small communal gatherings to mark the occasion. The people would come together in the narrow hallways, sharing what little they had, perhaps some bread, a bit of wine, or a simple stew, and celebrate together. The warmth of the fire, the camaraderie, and the joy of being with others created a temporary escape from the harshness of the world outside. In these moments, the coldness of the Roman winter faded into the background, replaced by the warmth of shared experience. The Roman winter festivals, with their music, feasts, and celebrations, were essential not only for physical warmth but for the emotional health of the people. They were a way of pushing back against the isolation and bleakness of winter, finding joy in community and connection, even when the world outside seemed cold and uninviting. The festivals provided a necessary balance between the harsh realities of Roman life and the restorative power of joy and celebration. How would it feel to celebrate in the dead of winter, surrounded by the warmth of friends, music, and laughter, knowing that even as the cold lingers outside, the spirit of community that would carry you through? The Romans understood that, even in the darkest of times, there is always light to be found in the company of others. The festivals, especially in the cold of winter, were a reminder that no matter how long the nights, no matter how harsh the winter, there is always a reason to come together, to share warmth, and to celebrate life. As the cold of winter settled over ancient Rome, it brought more than just discomfort, it brought vulnerability. For the Romans, particularly the poor, the harsh winter months posed a constant threat to health. The cold winds that swept through the city, the dampness that seeped into homes, and the thin walls of the insulae, the apartment buildings where many of the lower classes lived, created the perfect conditions for illness to spread. With no modern medicine or antibiotics, the Romans faced winter's dangers with little more than their own resourcefulness and determination to survive. The colder months brought with them a sharp increase in respiratory infections. The dampness of the streets and the chill in the air made it easy for colds, coughs, and fevers to develop, particularly for those living in poorly insulated homes. The poor, in particular, were at great risk, as they lived in cramped, dark spaces where the cold seemed to seep into their very bones. The streets, often muddy and slick with rain, became breeding grounds for bacteria and germs. People would walk through the freezing rain, their thin woolen clothing offering minimal protection against the biting wind. Without proper shelter, it was easy for the cold to settle into the chest, leading to respiratory infections that could quickly escalate into something more serious. Pneumonia, bronchitis, and other lung conditions were common during the winter, and there was little that could be done to treat them. The idea of antibiotics was far beyond the grasp of the Romans, and so, once someone contracted a serious illness, there was little hope of recovery. Many times illnesses would spread quickly through the crowded insulae where families lived. In close quarters, the poor quality of the air thick with smoke from fires, with no way to ventilate their homes only added to the misery. The air was often heavy with soot, making it difficult to breathe and increasing the likelihood of respiratory problems. In addition to the respiratory infections, there was the ever-present danger of hypothermia. For the poorest Romans, who couldn't afford the luxury of a well-heated home, the cold was an ever-present threat. In the dead of winter, it wasn't uncommon for the poor to wake up in the morning with frost on the inside of their walls, a reminder of how little warmth reached them during the long dark nights. The woolen blankets they used offered little protection, and the small fires in the hearths were often insufficient to heat an entire room, much less the entire home. As temperatures dropped, the cold could penetrate the body, making it harder to stay warm and increasing the risk of illness. And yet, for all the risks the cold posed, it was still essential for survival to continue with daily life. Families couldn't afford to huddle inside all day long, so they ventured out into the city to buy food, go to the baths, or carry on with whatever work they could manage. The cold made everything harder. Each step outside was a gamble against the elements, but there was little choice. The farmers would work the fields, despite the freezing temperatures, and the laborers would still haul stone, wood, and other materials for the construction of roads and buildings. But with every laborious task, there was a constant battle against the chill, a fight that the Romans were forced to endure. For the wealthier Romans, winter's challenges were not as dire, though they too had to contend with its grip. While they might have lived in homes with more substantial heating systems like the hypocaust, their wealth didn't necessarily protect them from the risks of illness. Like their poorer counterparts, they were vulnerable to the same respiratory infections that could take hold in the damp, cold air. However, they did have access to better food, more comfortable living spaces, and physicians who could offer some remedies, albeit limited ones. They were more likely to have warm clothing, larger fires, and the luxury of servants who could tend to the fires, ensuring the heat lasted through the coldest nights. But even the rich were not immune from winter's dangers. The Roman elite, too, could suffer from hypothermia or illnesses that would be fatal in an age without modern medicine. In the absence of effective treatments, the Romans had their own ways of trying to stave off the effects of the cold. Hot baths were one of the most important means of combating the chill, and the Romans visited the public baths frequently during the winter months. The baths were not only a place to clean the body, but also a way to warm up and relax, helping to relieve the tension caused by the cold. The hot water and the steam helped open the pores and allowed the body to sweat out impurities, offering a temporary but effective way to ward off the effects of winter. In wealthier homes, larger, more elaborate heating systems like the hypocaust would keep rooms warmer, but in the lower classes, families would huddle together for warmth, the body heat from each member providing a fragile but necessary layer of protection from the cold. However, despite these efforts, illness still took its toll, and there were no guarantees of survival for those who fell ill. With no antibiotics, no vaccines, and limited medical knowledge, a simple cold could easily develop into something much more severe. As families gathered together in their small, cold homes, the shared warmth could offer comfort, but it also meant that when one person got sick, the entire household was at risk. Reflecting on the Roman winter, it's hard not to consider how much vulnerability the Romans faced during the cold months. Imagine facing winter with no antibiotics, no warm homes, and no way to stave off the cold. How would you protect your loved ones? It's a sobering thought. For the Romans, winter was not just a season, it was a battle for survival, a time when illness and death loomed just a little closer, and every cough, every shiver, could be the start of something much worse. And yet, despite the harshness the Romans endured, they faced the winter with resilience, with the knowledge that the warmth of the sun would eventually return, bringing with it not just light and warmth, but the chance to heal and begin again. Winter on the Roman frontier was a harsh and unforgiving time for the soldiers stationed in distant provinces. While the heart of Rome basked in the relative comforts of its impressive architecture and thriving markets, the legions stationed at the empire's northern edges faced a far grimmer reality. The extreme cold, often compounded by snow and biting winds, tested the endurance and resolve of Roman soldiers who were trained for battle, but not necessarily for the brutal challenges of winter survival. Roman soldiers were renowned for their discipline and adaptability, but nothing could fully prepare them for the harsh conditions they often faced during the colder months. Unlike their counterparts stationed in more temperate regions, soldiers in the north, particularly in places like Britannia, Gaul, or Germania, were forced to contend with freezing temperatures and the lack of adequate shelter. There were no heated barracks, no fires burning in every room to keep the cold at bay. Instead, soldiers built their own camps, made from wood and stone, but these were often inadequate to withstand the brutal winters that could last for months. Imagine the challenge, marching through snow-covered fields, your boots sinking into the frozen earth with every step. The biting wind cuts through your cloak and tunic, leaving you numb, your breath visible in the frigid air. It's a constant battle against the elements, one that requires more than just physical strength. It demands mental fortitude. Survival, in this case, is less about triumph on the battlefield and more about enduring the long, grueling days of winter. Every soldier's ability to endure the cold was vital, for the unity of the legion depended on each person's resilience. During the winter months, the Romans had to adapt their usual military routines. Warfare in these seasons was limited because both armies and their horses were less effective in the freezing conditions. Instead, soldiers spent their time building fortifications, patrolling the borders, and preparing for the warmer months when military campaigns would resume. This downtime, however, was no less challenging. The lack of proper shelter meant that many soldiers slept in damp, cold conditions, huddled together in small tents or simple shelters that offered little protection from the frost. Food was another issue. The farther away from Rome a legion was stationed, the more limited the supplies became. The Romans were skilled at organizing military logistics, but even their ingenuity could only stretch supplies so far in the dead of winter. Soldiers had to rely on preserved foods, such as salted meats, dried grains, and hard biscuits, which could sustain them but offered little comfort. The cold often made cooking difficult, and meals were usually simple and unsatisfying, just enough to keep the soldiers going until warmer months allowed for more fresh provisions. The lack of variety in their diet, combined with the cold, often left soldiers feeling weak. The winter months were marked by increased sickness and disease issues that could spread quickly through the tight-knit, communal living conditions of the Roman camp. The uniforms of the Roman soldiers, though designed for battle, did little to protect against extreme cold. The heavy woolen tunics and cloaks provided some insulation, but they weren't enough to fend off the bitter chill of a northern winter. Soldiers wore sandals made of leather, which were not ideal for trudging through snow or ice. They had to, if we rely on layering and improvisation, wrapping extra cloth around their legs and feet, and constantly battling the cold, which could lead to frostbite or other injuries. Some soldiers even fashioned makeshift coverings for their feet from animal skins to keep their toes from freezing. Despite these hardships, the Romans had methods for maintaining their strength and discipline, even in the dead of winter. The bond between soldiers was essential, and their ability to rely on each other for warmth and support was a matter of survival. In the harsh conditions of the frontiers, soldiers would often gather together around a fire, sharing warmth, food, and stories to help pass the long, cold nights. Even as the temperatures dropped, the soldiers were expected to maintain their training, drilling, marching, and keeping up their physical conditioning. Winter was a time for individual and collective perseverance, where each soldier was pushed to their limits, but where the camaraderie of the group provided the necessary strength to endure. One of the most important aspects of surviving the winter for the Roman soldier was the construction of a proper camp. Even in the dead of winter, the soldiers were expected to build fortified camps each night to protect themselves from both the elements and any potential enemy attacks. These camps were strategically designed, with ditches, wooden walls, and defensive structures meant to keep the soldiers safe. The process of building these camps became almost routine, but in winter, the work was harder. The ground was frozen, the wood harder to chop, and the labor left soldiers physically drained. But even in the darkest, coldest nights, the knowledge that their camp was secure brought them a measure of peace, knowing that at least their immediate surroundings were protected from the dangers of the outside world. What would it be like to march through snow, feeling the sting of the wind, knowing that survival depends on your unity and strength? The Roman soldiers knew that their survival was not just about individual grit. It was about the strength of the legion as a whole. As harsh as winter was, it forged bonds between the soldiers, creating a camaraderie that would carry them through the darkest months. The shared struggle against the elements, the shared meals, and the shared hardships built trust and a sense of collective purpose. Surviving winter in the field required a mental toughness that was as important as physical strength. It was about enduring, about never giving up, even when the cold seemed unbearable, the food scarce, and the shelter insufficient. For the Roman soldier, the winter months were a test of resilience. Every footstep through the snow, every cold night spent huddled in a freezing tent, was a reminder of their dedication, discipline, and loyalty to Rome and to each other. The Roman military's ability to endure such hardships was a testament to their strength. Though the freezing temperatures and limited supplies made life on the frontier difficult, the soldiers continued to hold the line, their unity and shared purpose proving stronger than the cold winds that howled around them. It was not just about surviving the winter, it was about facing it with unwavering resolve, knowing that the strength of the legion could overcome any challenge, even the harshest of seasons. ChatGPT said, winter in ancient Rome, particularly for women, was a season marked by unseen struggles, long hours of hard work, and a constant battle against the elements. While the soldiers fought on the front lines and the men of Rome conducted their business, it was the women who often bore the brunt of the daily challenges that came with the colder months. The cold and dampness seeped into the very bones of those living in the cramped insulae or the modest homes scattered across the city. The battle to keep the family warm and well-fed, while also managing the endless chores of daily life, was a task that required both resilience and ingenuity. In the mornings before the sun had fully risen, women would already be at work, tending to the fire that was often their household's only source of heat. If the fire had died overnight, something that was not uncommon in the cold of winter, it had to be reignited, sometimes from the embers left in the hearth or from a spark struck by flint. The process was slow and laborious. Firewood, often difficult to come by and expensive, had to be carefully managed. Every piece of wood was precious, and women learned to use it wisely, ensuring that the warmth from the fire lasted through the night. The hearth was the heart of the Roman home, and the warmth it provided was essential not only for survival but for comfort. Once the fire was going, the tasks of daily life would begin. For many women, this meant cooking, cleaning, and tending to the family's needs. Meals during the winter months were often simple and hearty, but preparing them was no small task. A meal of stew, bread, and cheese might take hours to prepare, and even longer to cook, especially when the fire was weak. The kitchen would often be filled with the smells of simmering vegetables, meats, and herbs. But as the women cooked, they had to battle the cold that crept through the walls of their homes. No matter how close to the fire they sat, the cold would always find a way in, seeping into the very air and making everything feel just a little bit more difficult. When it came to caring for children, the struggle was even more intense. Babies and young children were particularly vulnerable to the cold, their small bodies unable to regulate temperature as well as adults. Women would bundle their children in layers of wool and cloth, wrapping them tightly to keep them warm. Despite these precautions, the constant chill and the dampness of the environment meant that colds, coughs, and respiratory illnesses were a frequent concern. There was little in the way of medicine or remedies to treat these illnesses, and for many women, the fear of losing a child to the ravages of winter illness was a constant companion. Throughout the day, women would care for the household, manage the chores, and attend to the needs of their husbands and children. The cold made everything harder. Laundry took longer to dry, and even the simplest of tasks required more effort. Women would often be on their feet all day, moving between the hearth, the kitchen, and the rest of the house, constantly working to keep things in order while keeping themselves warm. But despite their tireless efforts, there was always more work to be done. The cold, the lack of warmth, and the limited resources meant that there was no such thing as a break. The struggle to ensure the family's survival through the winter was ongoing, and it often felt like an uphill battle at night. When the family gathered together around the fire, women often had little time to rest. The fire needed tending, the children needed to be tucked in, and the house had to be prepared for another cold night. With no modern heating systems or insulated homes, the cold would creep in once more, making sleep difficult for everyone, especially for the women, who had to manage the household. Their rest was broken, their bodies tired from the constant work, and the cold made it all the harder to find comfort. But perhaps the greatest challenge for Roman women during the winter months was the emotional and psychological toll it took. The weight of responsibility for the family's well-being rested largely on their shoulders. While their husbands might be away working, attending to the needs of the family was solely in the hands of the women. They were the ones who kept the fire going, the ones who ensured there was food to eat, and the ones who cared for sick children. The cold, the isolation, and the endless work left little room for self-care or rest. Women lived in a constant state of concern, always aware that the warmth of the fire, the health of the children, and the happiness of the family depended on their efforts. The emotional labor of winter was not something that could be seen. It wasn't marked by grand gestures or visible accomplishments. It was the quiet, daily toil of ensuring that the family made it through the harsh season, even when the cold was at its worst. Even when the hearth was barely warm enough to ward off the chill, women found ways to keep their families going. They were the silent warriors, enduring hardships in ways that often went unrecognized by society. Have you ever thought about the women who lived through such harsh conditions, ensuring their families survived another winter? It's easy to focus on the grand events of history, the soldiers, the emperors, the great battles, but often it is the quiet strength of women that holds everything together. The women of ancient Rome faced the same winter hardships as their male counterparts, but their struggle was often more hidden, more personal. They fought a battle every day, not against invaders or enemies, but against the cold, the hardships, and the constant demands of their families. And in doing so, they ensured that the warmth of life, however fleeting, could continue through even the harshest winters. Winter in ancient Rome was not only harsh for the free citizens but also for the slaves, who often endured the cold with little in the way of comfort or reprieve. Their lives were already filled with long hours of work, but in winter, the challenges were amplified. While the masters of the house could retreat into warm, well-guarded chambers, slaves often found themselves working tirelessly in the cold, serving the needs of their owners while battling the elements. In wealthy Roman households, slaves performed a range of essential tasks, many of which centered around keeping the home warm and functional during the winter months. Despite the availability of larger hearths and sometimes even hypocausts in the homes of the elite, slaves were the ones responsible for maintaining these heat sources. They would stoke the fires, ensuring that the flames burned bright enough to keep the cold at bay. The hypocaust system, though a marvel of Roman engineering, required constant attention to function properly, and it was often the responsibility of the slaves to ensure the fires in the furnaces were stoked throughout the night. This task, which demanded both physical endurance and skill, was crucial for the warmth of the household. Without the slaves tending to the fires, the warmth would quickly dissipate, leaving everyone, master and servant, alike vulnerable to the cold. But even in homes with heating systems, the cold still crept in. The architecture of Roman houses, particularly in the insulae where many of the poor and slaves lived, was not built for insulation. The walls were often thin, letting in the chill from the outside. The small fires that slaves were able to light inside these humble spaces were often weak and would not fully protect against the bitter temperatures. Slaves, especially those living in less wealthy households, were particularly vulnerable, sleeping in cramped rooms without the comforts of warm clothing or thick blankets. The cold would seep into their bones as they slept on hard, cold floors. The warmth of the hearth, a fleeting luxury that often disappeared once the fire burned low. In the midst of this hardship, slaves also played an essential role in the household's daily functioning. They prepared meals for the family, often cooking over a fire in the kitchen where warmth was a fleeting companion. The kitchen itself could be a cold place, where the stoves were small and inefficient compared to the grand hearths of the living rooms. Slaves would spend hours preparing food in this environment, often standing for long periods of time near an inadequate heat source. The air would be filled with the smells of cooking meats and stews, but the warmth they offered was fleeting. And as soon as the meal was served, the kitchen returned to its chilly state. In addition to serving the needs of their masters, slaves were also responsible for many of the maintenance tasks around the house. They would sweep the floors, carry firewood to keep the fires going, and help with the general upkeep of the household. In many cases, they also cared for the children and elderly, ensuring that the most vulnerable members of the household were kept warm and comfortable during the colder months. The physical demands of their labor, combined with the constant exposure to the cold, took a toll on the health of many slaves. Without proper medical care or rest, illnesses like pneumonia or frostbite could easily become life-threatening. In the larger Roman cities, slaves working in urban environments faced the same cold, but often without the benefits of an indoor hearth to protect them. Many slaves worked in the streets, running errands, transporting goods, or working as laborers in construction. In these roles, they were exposed to the elements for hours on end, and the winter months meant dealing with rain, snow, and freezing temperatures while performing their labor. With no proper clothing to shield them from the cold, their thin tunics and sandals offered little protection as they trudged through the icy streets of Rome, carrying heavy loads or running errands for their masters. The cold would have been unbearable while they endured the hardships of winter. The role of slaves in Roman society was often overlooked. Their suffering, their hard work, and their sacrifices were invisible to the upper classes who enjoyed the comforts of their warm homes. The idea that slaves would work tirelessly to keep their masters warm and fed, all while enduring the biting cold themselves, was rarely acknowledged. They were expected to maintain the same level of efficiency and service throughout the winter, regardless of the physical toll the cold took on them. For the slaves, winter was not just a time of physical hardship, which was also a time of emotional and psychological strain. The isolation and separation from their families, who might be scattered across different households or regions, made the cold months even more difficult. The warmth of the hearth, which could provide comfort for free Romans, offered no relief. For the slaves who were expected to work long hours, often without respite, they were constantly at the beck and call of their masters, their own needs and well-being pushed to the side in favor of maintaining the household's warmth and functioning in a way. The Roman slave's role in the winter months symbolized the quiet suffering that underpinned much of Roman society. While the elite Romans enjoyed the comforts of heated floors, lavish meals, and social gatherings, their slaves worked in silence, ensuring that the family could stay warm and well-fed. The resilience of these individuals, who fought against the elements day after day without recognition or reward, is a testament to their endurance and strength. What might it have been like to work tirelessly, serving your masters while enduring the biting cold? The slaves of ancient Rome were the unsung heroes of the household during the winter months. They were the ones who kept the fires burning, who prepared the meals, and who kept the wheels of Roman society turning, all while enduring the harshest conditions. Their work, though invisible, was essential to the survival of the household, and yet, they were the ones who felt the cold most keenly. Their story, often forgotten, reminds us of the sacrifices made by those who served, their suffering hidden beneath the warmth of their master's comforts. ChatGPT said, as the cold winds of winter swept through ancient Rome, bringing darkness early in the day and long, icy nights, the people of the empire found ways to keep busy, both to survive the harsh conditions and to preserve their mental and emotional well-being. The winter months could feel isolating, with the chill keeping many indoors and the short days leaving little time for outdoor activities. However, the Romans were a resourceful people, and they found ways to make the most of the long, cold nights. From storytelling to crafting, from feasting to socializing, these activities helped keep morale high, fostering a sense of community and continuity despite the challenges of the season. One of the most common ways Romans passed the winter nights was through storytelling. The long, cold evenings provided the perfect opportunity to gather around the fire and share tales, legends, and anecdotes. In Roman households, especially in the poorer quarters, storytelling was an essential form of entertainment and social bonding. Parents would recount the heroic deeds of the gods and goddesses, the great battles of Rome's past, or local legends passed down from generation to generation to generation. These stories were more than just a way to pass the time. They were a means of connecting with the past, of teaching moral lessons, and of keeping the history of Rome alive in the minds of the younger generation. The rich tradition of storytelling also extended to the festivals and social gatherings that took place during the winter months. The festival of Saturnalia, for example, was a time of great revelry, but it was also a time for sharing stories and engaging in lively conversation. The role reversals and the temporary relaxation of social norms during Saturnalia meant that slaves and masters could gather together as equals, exchanging stories and laughter in a way that wasn't typical of Roman society. Even in the midst of winter's cold, the warmth of camaraderie and shared experience could make the nights feel shorter and less lonely. Crafting was another activity that helped the Romans stay occupied during the cold winter months. For many, the winter season was a time to work on projects that had been set aside during the busier months. Roman women, in particular, engaged in various forms of crafting, spinning wool into yarn, weaving, and knitting clothes for the family, to ensure they were well prepared for the colder weather. The steady rhythm of spinning and weaving could be a meditative practice, providing not only warmth in the form of new garments but also a sense of accomplishment and productivity. The act of crafting also provided a way to bond with family members as they worked together to create items for the home, whether it was a warm blanket, a new cloak, or a piece of pottery. For those with a bit of leisure time, many Romans turned to artistic pursuits during the winter. Writing, drawing, and painting were forms of expression that could be done indoors, away from the harsh elements. Wealthier Romans might even commission sculptures or frescoes to decorate their homes, turning their living spaces into havens of warmth and beauty. While these activities might have been considered luxuries for the upper class, even the poorest Romans found ways to express themselves through simple crafts or by keeping written records of their lives. This creative outlet helped them maintain a sense of identity and purpose during the long winter months. Feasting was another important activity in Roman winter life, especially during the major festivals like Saturnalia and the Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun. These occasions were marked by elaborate banquets where food, drink, and companionship helped ward off the isolation and gloom of winter. The Romans didn't just feast for the sake of sustenance, they feasted to celebrate the sun's return, to mark the turning point of the year, and to ensure that the cold, dark months were filled with joy and warmth. The sharing of meals, accompanied by music, dancing, and the exchange of stories, provided a much-needed break from the monotony of daily life. Even outside of the festivals, Romans found ways to make the most of their meals. Since food was an important part of Roman culture, it was often during the winter that families spent more time together in the kitchen, preparing hearty stews, soups, and breads to help combat the cold. The act of cooking and sharing a meal, even a simple one, fostered a sense of togetherness that transcended the hardships of winter. In wealthier households, slaves might spend hours preparing feasts, while the family would come together in the warmth of the home, discussing politics, family matters, or the latest gossip from the city. For those who had the space and the means, physical activity was another way to maintain morale during the winter months. While outdoor exercises were limited due to the cold, many Romans engaged in indoor activities like wrestling or playing games. The ludus, a type of school for physical training, was not just for soldiers or athletes. It was also a place for the general public to engage in physical activities, even during the winter. Indoor games like dice or board games were also popular, providing a way for families and friends to bond while passing the time. Finally, Religious observances were an essential part of Roman life, particularly in the winter months. Many Romans turned to their gods during this time, offering prayers and sacrifices for protection and prosperity in the coming year. The return of the sun, celebrated during the winter solstice, was a powerful symbol of renewal and hope. Romans believed that honoring the gods, through offerings and rituals, would ensure their safety during the cold months and bring warmth and light back into their lives. These religious practices provided not only a sense of security but also a collective purpose during the dark days of winter. What activities help you get through the cold nights? Can you imagine how the Romans kept themselves occupied during their long, harsh winters? The Romans, like us, found ways to fill the winter months with meaning, joy, and productivity. Whether through storytelling, crafting, feasting, or socializing, they created rituals and activities that made the cold season feel more bearable. They turned winter into a time not of isolation, but of connection both with each other and with the traditions that held their society together. Through these shared experiences, they were able to endure the cold and come together in ways that made the winter months a time of warmth. Not just in temperature, but in spirit. As we look back at the lives of the Romans during the coldest and darkest months of winter, it's impossible not to feel a deep sense of awe for their resilience. While the empire itself was a symbol of power and grandeur, the true strength of Rome often lay in the everyday perseverance of its people. The Roman spirit was defined not just by monumental conquests or grandiose buildings, but by the ability of its citizens to endure hardships, especially during the brutal winter months. Winter in ancient Rome was no easy feat. The days were short, the cold was biting, and for many, the winter months meant a constant battle against the elements. In the poorer districts, families huddled together in drafty insulae, where the walls were thin, the floors were cold, and the only source of heat was a small, sputtering fire. The rich might have had the luxury of heated floors and extravagant feasts, but the majority of Romans struggled against the chill in ways that required incredible strength and determination. Yet, despite the harshness of the season, they found ways to survive, and even thrive, through sheer willpower and unity. The key to Roman endurance in the winter was their ability to come together as a community. In the face of the cold and isolation, Romans gathered in warmth, whether it was around the hearth of a modest home, in the bustling communal spaces of the bathhouses, or in the social hubs of festivals like Saturnalia. There was strength in numbers, and the shared experience of facing winter's challenges brought people closer. The warmth of human connection was as vital to survival as the fire in the hearth. This communal spirit, forged in the cold, became an integral part of Roman identity. Roman women, slaves, and children, those whose contributions were often overlooked, played a central role in maintaining this sense of community. Women carried the weight of managing the household, tending to the fires, and ensuring their families were kept warm. Slaves, despite enduring their own hardships, ensured that the fires of the hearths burned and that the home was livable in the midst of winter. Even the smallest hands were needed to keep the family alive. Children were wrapped in layers to protect them from the biting cold, while the elderly, vulnerable to the winter's grip, received care and attention from their families. In each Roman home, the survival of each member depended on the care and efforts of those around them, no matter their status or role. The winter festivals, too, played a significant role in sustaining the Roman people's spirits. Celebrations like Saturnalia offered more than just a break from the monotony of cold. It provided a temporary escape from the rigors of everyday life. For a brief time, the usual social order was upended, and Romans of all classes could gather together, enjoy, feast, exchange gifts, and even experience a brief, joyous respite from their responsibilities. These festivals were a reminder that, no matter how cold the winter, the warmth of community and celebration could still light up the darkest of days. Yet, even in these moments of warmth and community, the cold of winter remained ever present. The Romans had no electric heating systems, no central heating, and no insulation against the elements. They relied on what little warmth they could generate through fire, woolen clothing, and the closeness of family. It was a harsh existence, but it was one that was met with a quiet acceptance. The Romans had a deep understanding that survival was not guaranteed, but that the will to endure, and to face whatever came with courage, was the path to resilience. The harshness of Roman winters was not only a physical challenge, it was a test of the spirit. The Romans did not have the modern conveniences that many of us take for granted, and yet they endured. There was no constant flow of heat in their homes, no warm electric blankets, no centralized heating in every room. The cold would have seeped into every crack, into their bones, making even the simplest task more difficult. Yet, Romans found ways to stay warm, to keep going, and to keep hope alive. They did this not through grand gestures or dramatic acts of defiance, but through quiet, everyday perseverance. It was their capacity to adapt, to make do with what they had, and to care for one another that allowed the Roman people to survive through the harshest of winters. They kept their homes warm through constant vigilance, stoking fires, layering their clothing, and using every resource they could find to fight back against the cold. For many, it was not just a fight against nature, it was a fight against isolation, loneliness, and the fear of what the winter might bring. But through community, warmth, and the strength of human connection, the Romans proved that they could weather any storm. As we reflect on the endurance of the Roman spirit, we must consider the internal fortitude that drove them to survive in such conditions. Their resilience wasn't simply about the physical tools they had, wood, wool, or fire. It was about their mental toughness, their unwavering belief in the power of unity, and their refusal to be defeated by the cold. They found strength not just in themselves, but in the people around them. The Roman winter was long and difficult, but the spirit of the people was far longer and more enduring. How do you think these Romans found the strength to endure? What would it take for you to survive such harsh conditions? Reflecting on their experience, it's clear that the answer lies not just in the physical elements of survival, but in the strength of human relationships, the power of community, and the resilience to face whatever challenges come with each season. The Romans endured because they knew that together, no winter could last forever. The warmth of the sun would return, and with it, hope for another season of life. In the darkest months of winter, the Romans found strength in the most basic human need, the need to connect, to survive, and to live.